In this video lesson, I'd like to walk through the process of trying to create this parametric cube in Onshape. This cube's height, width, depth, and even the thickness of the material is all driven off of some variables, and each one of the parts are parametric to each other. One thing that I'm going to do in this activity that's a little bit different than some others is I want you to start thinking of Onshape a little bit differently. When you create a new document, it's not really a document anymore, it's an entire project. And inside this project, you can have as many parts as you want. You can have assemblies and sub-assemblies. You can have all of the drawing documents, and you can continue adding as many of them as you want. So in this activity, I'm really only going to model 3 different pieces because there's 2 of them that'll be the same for front and back, 2 of them that are the same for the left and right, and then the top and bottom. So those are the only pieces that I need to model, and I'm going to model them as components in place. They're all going to get modeled in the exact same file. Then I'll go ahead and do my assembly and then make my working drawings, and then I can export that out from my laser. So as you interpret those pieces, you can see that you have one that's all tabs all the way around. You have one that's no tabs or slots all the way around, and then I have one that's half-half. This is the one that I'm going to go ahead and start with. So I'm going to go ahead and create a whole new file. And as I stated, I don't want you to think of this just as a document anymore. This is now a project where all of my pieces are going to live. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and do a sketch on my front view. And I'm going to start off with a rectangle. I am going to go ahead and lock it onto the origin so I have some type of reference point. And I'm just going to come out here somewhere. All right, so now I'm going to do the part that has all of the tabs missing. So I can just go ahead and randomly draw 4 little rectangles. But I know there's a lot of things about that are going to be similar. The top and bottom, not only are they going to be the same size, but they're also going to be lined up with each other. Well, that's something that you can do. You can grab this part. I can bring it up and link it onto the other one. I've not let go of my mouse yet, but as I drag it down with that little orange dot, then that will link those together. So now that when one moves, they both move. I can do the same thing here. I can grab this one. I can link it onto that one. I can do the same thing here and link it onto that one. So now as one piece moves, they both move parametrically together. But I could have done that as I drew. So if I had just deleted those, when I drew them, I could have done the same thing. I could have linked it onto there. I've not clicked. I've not actually grabbed it. I've just taught Onshape that that's something that I would like these 2 points to be in line with each other. And then I can do the same thing with this one. I just highlight it. I teach it that that's a reference point that it can tether to, and it'll do it for me. So you can do them afterwards, or you can kind of do them on the fly as you go. The only thing it's not going to do on its own is it's not going to do the thickness of those little tabs. I'm going to do the equal sign for that. So I'm going to go ahead and do an equals between those, and then an equal between these, and then one more time around. Now if I actually grab the top one, that's not going to show what I want. If I grab the bottom one, since it's attached to this black line, then it will represent the thickness for me. So I can now see that not only do they shift side to side with each other, they also have the same thickness because they're equal. Okay, so now comes the problem of trying to put on a dimension, and I'm trying to put on a variable. The way Onshape works is you can't actually define any variables in the sketch. Once that's defined in feature mode or 3D mode. So I'm going to go ahead and end my sketch, and over here I can see that I have variables. This gives me the ability to actually assign my own user parameters or my own variables. So if I click on it, I can go ahead and type in something like height. And then I'm going to go ahead and say that's 1 inch. The problem is, as I go back into the sketch and try to put on a dimension for the height, it's not usable. It's not something that's been assigned yet. It works just like it does in regular programming. Because this variable's been assigned after the sketch, then it can't be used in the sketch. So I can just grab it and drag it above it. So now when I go in and I want to define dimension as height, all I really have to do is type in h. And as soon as I do, it'll give me every variable that has an h to it. And mine is the first one. So hashtag height. And enter, and it will automatically do that for me. So while I'm at it, I might as well go ahead and define some other ones. So I'm going to finish sketch, go back to my parameters, and how about width? I'm going to make that 1 inch for now. Depth, And how about thick? That'll be 1/8 of an inch. That'll be the material that I'm actually going to cut this out of. So now that I've created them all, rather than dragging them all above sketch 1, I can just grab sketch 1 and drag it down. There we go. So now as we go back in here, we can start putting on the rest of our dimensions. So this is going to be width. This will be thickness. And I have almost everything defined. What I don't have defined right now is where these rectangles belong. Now I've got several different ways I can do it, but the one thing that I know is I'm typically going to want them to stay in the middle. So I'm going to do another geometric constraint that's going to try to do that. So I'm actually going to shift this off to the side for a moment. What I want is the midpoint of this rectangle to be locked onto the midpoint of this rectangle. And unfortunately right now, even with a coincident, I can't do it. All the geometric constraints right now inside Onshape, they'll find endpoints, but they won't find midpoints. So a workaround is to define a midpoint. So I'm going to use the point tool that I usually use for defining holes, and I can then identify midpoints. Now that I've done that, I can now go ahead and do a coincident and say that I want those two midpoints to be on top of each other. Awesome. And now I'll do the same thing for this one. I'm just going to scoot it off to the side a little bit so that I can make sure that I actually get the right midpoints. So midpoint and midpoint and a coincidence. Okay, great. So now they're locked into the middle, but I don't have anything that's actually defining their size. So I need to think about how big or small would I like these to be. And I would like them to be variable. So as this dimension changes, I'd like these to be able to adapt to it. So somehow I'm going to have to use this dimension in this one's dimension. So how about something like this one's going to be width divided by 2. That's not bad. And how about this one? Those aren't bad, but they are starting to get a little bit close right here. I don't know necessarily what that dimension is. Let's just do a dimension here. So I'm looking at a little over 1/8 of an inch, under 1/4 of an inch. How about divided by 3? Those may be a little bit too much. That doesn't really give me the surface area to be able to glue all this together. How about a happy medium of 1.5? How about that's something that I may not know what I really want yet? So I'm going to make that a variable. So I'm going to leave my sketch, go make a one called, I don't know, divider. And let's go with the 2.5 for now. If we don't like it later, then it becomes something that we can change. I went ahead and drug that above sketch. And then it will be width divided by divider. Okay, excellent. So I'm happy with that piece. Everything is completely black and everything is parametric. These are dimensions that can all be driven off of my variables. Okay, so let's go ahead and put it in isometric and do our extrusion. I'm going to turn off my work features and do an extrusion. So I don't want everything that's here, or I could just pick the sketch. All I want is that inside part, so I'm just going to pick that instead. And then I've already defined this as thickness. I've even already used it in my formulas. So great, I have one piece completely done. And remember, in here, all I need to do is design the 3 pieces as components in place, and then I'll go ahead and drag them over to the assembly. Okay, so now I need to decide, am I going to do the one that has all tabs or the one that's 50-50? Let's go ahead and do the one that has all tabs. So I'm going to do a sketch. I could do it inside here or here. It hasn't really defined whether that needs to be the right or left or the top or bottom. How about this one? So I could also do it on top here. Let's do it in here. Okay, so this next tool is going to be something a little bit different. We've not used this tool yet, as I'm going to use or project. What I want to do is borrow geometry from this piece. So I'm going to click on use, and I'm just going to click these 3 rectangles. Now that I've got those 3 rectangles, I can actually borrow them as pieces or dimensions for my next one. Okay, so let's put on a large rectangle. I'm not going to just randomly click out here somewhere. I'm going to let it know that it gets tied onto this point. And we said this one's going to be all tabs. Is that right? This one's going to be all tabs. So let's, oops. I'm going to do that rectangle just a little bit different. So undo. Let's make my tabs first. There's going to be a tab here. Maybe I should do this as the one that's tabs and slots. Let's do that. I don't want to make it more confusing than it needs to be. So let's go back to where we were. Okay, so this side's going to have another tab on it. And again, I told you can do these later. So I can link that onto there. I can link this one onto here. So now those are tethered. So I have tabs on those sides, and then this will be my gaps. Okay, I think that's going to be easier. All right, let's see if we can't start putting some dimensions on here. So I know this is going to be thick. I don't even need that. I already have that defined as this one. So I can just use my equal sign. That's equal to that, which is thick. And that one too. That saves me from having to put some extra dimensions on there. How about we do a midpoint? Oh, those are already tied together, so I don't even need to do a midpoint there. This tab is completely done because it's the same as this one. Awesome. All we'll need to do is it to here. So he knows how tall to be. Let's put on our overall dimension. That's going to be depth. And then we need something that's going to lock this into place. So let's do like we did before. I'm going to go ahead and put a point here and a point here. And we'll lock those together. And then we'll go ahead and shrink this and we'll put on the dimension. So the dimension here is going to be depth divided by divider. Is that right? It looks right because I've got a tab here, spacing, tab. That all looks good. All I need to do is tether this one onto that one. And it looks like I must have missed an equals or it wouldn't have allowed me to do that. Let's go back and say that it wouldn't. If I had done the equals first, and then I couldn't drag that up and over, you still can. So I can just drag this and bring my mouse, even though I can't actually bring it over, since I can get my mouse to go to it, I can still do the same thing. So that's pretty darn cool. All right, so let's finish that, put an isometric and extrude. So these 3 pieces as thick. But unfortunately right now, if I go ahead and accept it, it's going to heal those together, and they're not going to be separate pieces. So to be that whole component's in place, I need to go to that extrusion 2, and I need to say new solid. As soon as I do that, it will turn it into a new solid. It also changes its color so that you can automatically see the difference between the pieces. Okay, awesome. So we have a front and back. We have a top and bottom. I'm going to go ahead and identify those. So this one, right-click, rename. That's my front and back. Right-click, rename. And top and bottom. Okay, so now we have the one that's all tabs. Maybe this will be a little bit easier to kind of wrap my head around this time. So a new sketch inside here, and then project geometry. So I want to project this one and this one. And am I going to project anything else? I might be able to get away with just those. I want to try to avoid projecting a whole lot. So let's just see what I can do. I'm going to need to project that or I can't link onto it. So project, and I'm probably going to need to project this. Okay, so that's going to get linked onto here. And again, like I said, if it's painful to try to think about how to link these together, then I can always do it later. So that's going to come across from there. These will be equal to each other. And that has made that completely black. Okay, great. So I've already got a tab and a tab and a tab, and then I need one more. So that's going to come here, and then, oops, let's link those together. So that's going to come over here, and this one's going to tie onto that one. And this one's going to tie onto that one. Great, so I've got all 4 tabs. All I need now is something that's going to fill that in. So I don't have anything that I can link to there, but I can link to those guys. I can do the same thing here. So just hover over, bring it until they both link on. Done. I could have also projected geometry up there, but I wouldn't have had anything down here. Really? I have an entire piece that doesn't have a dimension on it? Looks like it. So put that in isometric and extrude. So pick my 4 tabs, pick the window in the middle, thick, and it's already on new, so it must think that I want a new piece instead of an add. Okay, great. I'm almost done. So now I'm ready to try to do an assembly. Before I do that, I want to start testing some pieces. So let's see, if height becomes 2, does that work? So height now adapts both the side pieces and the front and back. What about depth? Awesome. So now those components that are driven in place are all parametrically tied together. What about thickness? If I've done everything right, it looks like all the thicknesses have matched up. All right, I'm going to change at least that one back. Okay, so let's go over to our assembly. So I'm going to go to my assembly tab, and I'm going to come up to insert. As soon as I do, my parts are going to be available because they're all made in this file. I don't have to go to other documents and go hunting for them. They all live here, and you can now see that I have 3 separate parts. One of them I haven't even named yet. That was a mistake. I'm going to go back and do that. Okay, so now I've got all 3 parts named, and I can drop them in one at a time, but I can also just click on Part Studio, and that'll allow me to bring in all 3 at one time. Now, they look like they're assembled because they were brought in exactly like they were in parts, but they're actually free from each other, so I want to go ahead and assemble them and lock them into place. So one of them, and it doesn't matter which one of them I'm going to freeze in this 3D environment. I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to go to Fix. Now that piece can't move around. I've got one thing that's locked in place that everything else can be attached to. So this gray piece will go onto the top, and then my blue piece will come onto the front and back. All right. So for assemblies, this is all going to go pretty quick. I'm going to come to this little cylindrical one that says Fastened Mate. Once I have that, I'm going to wiggle my mouse around, do a little circle around whatever face you want to start on, and then pick a point that you can tie to, like the blue piece. So I want this face, and let's go with this point. I'm going to wiggle my mouse to a little circle and pick on that point. And that's it. Those pieces are now completely constrained together. Let's do the same thing with the gray. So wiggle my mouse around, pick a point, and unfortunately that one may be a little bit difficult to get. So I'm going to exit out of it, pull it up and away from it, so I can try that again. So wiggle it around, do a little circle, this point, a little circle, and that point. Great. So now I can just drop in my other 3 pieces. So I'm just going to highlight them and do a Control-C, Control-V for copy and paste, or you could insert them again. Okay, so I didn't know that. If you copy and paste multiple pieces all at the same time, if they were already constrained together, then when they get pasted with those same constraints. That's pretty cool, just not what I want. So I'm going to copy and paste each piece individually. Oops, I had 2 pieces highlighted. Okay, so let's get this little blue guy on there. So fastened mate. You know, it really doesn't matter which points you pick as long as they're points that you can kind of identify as ones that are going to be common. Like I think that point there is supposed to go into here. So those are the ones that I'm going to use. So fastened mate. Which one did I just say? This one onto that one. And then we'll put the bottom on. Little circle. Okay, great. And now I want to test it. So I'll come back in. I'm going to change my height to something like 2. I'll change my depth to 4. And my width to 3. And if they work in here, then they should also work in here. Great. To make them a little bit more interesting, I'm actually going to go ahead and punch a hole in each one of these faces. So I'm going to create myself a new parameter. And I'm going to call this space, maybe? And I'm going to make another one called fillet. Okay, so a sketch, and it really doesn't matter if I drag those all the way to the top because the sketch lives below them. It'd be up to you if you want to go ahead and do the fillet now as a 2D feature or whether you want to do it as a 3D feature. I'm going to do it as a 2D. Typically, if you've put a sketch onto a face, when you say extrude, you pick it and remove, then it knows which one you want to add it to. But make sure your merge scope says the actual name of the part that you want to do that cut in. And rather than doing it blind as a specific distance, I'll keep it parametric and say through all. And that way it'll always go through that part, no matter how thick I make it. And I'm just going to repeat that process for the other two. Great, and now I want to test it again. So I'll go back to my Part Studio, and we'll change our height to something like great, and everything seems to be kind of working except for some of these small ones. And it has to do with these two dimensions down there. My space and my fillet may just be too big for those specific sizes. So maybe they need to be a formula as well. A quarter of something or always a certain specific number of something else. But for right now, I should be able to just shrink them. There we go. So now if I make them both an eighth, then it seems to work. So same thing. I may need to go ahead and figure out a formula so that they're not a constant number and there's some kind of formula driven off of the rest of it. But it seems to work. So the last step is to go ahead and make a set of working drawings so that I can go ahead and send these to the laser. So I'm going to come to my plus and I'm going to create a new drawing. Right now I hit OK. And I'm going to escape out of this, and I'm going to delete everything that's here. When I send it to the laser, I actually don't want any of this stuff on my title block. So I'm even going to close this box, drag a window around what I don't want, and just hit backspace on my keyboard. Okay, there we go. So now we'll go back to Insert. Insert, and we'll just pick the pieces one at a time. Because they're all not drawn on the front face, I am going to have to try to choose what orientation I want. So top and bottom. And right now I can see that the front face is not correct for that one. So I'm going to change that to top. I'm going to hit escape because I don't want to put any other views. I just wanted that specific view. And I did need to make sure that right now, for some reason, it came in at 3:1. I want to make sure that it's just 1:1. And now I'll get the right scale. I actually don't want that on there either. So I just hit delete to get rid of that. And I'll go ahead and bring in the other pieces. Okay, great. That's all 3 pieces ready to export out. So I can go ahead and cut those on a plasma cutter or a laser or water jet, whatever it is that I need. Now, there is one more thing that I want to show you about this working drawing. Every time I make my changes to my variables in the part mode, they automatically update in the assembly, which is awesome. But for some reason they don't on the drawing. At least they don't auto update. So it's not that big a deal. I'm going to make a change just to show you. So I'll make that 2. So it updated here. It updated here. It just for whatever reason didn't necessarily update here, but it identified that as this little orange circle up here. So as soon as I go ahead and click it, it'll reinterpret the part and then go ahead and flatten them and make them correct on the sheet again. Okay, so how to export them? I'll just come down here to drawing. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to export. And then I can change that from a PDF to a DXF to a DWG, whatever your machinery needs. And that's it. Hope you can now go ahead and create your own parametric components in place cube.